What up, everybody? John the Morgal here. Hope you all having a great day. Today we're going to do a response to a couple of videos, so let's just get right on into them.
Seeing is believing, as these globes clearly illustrate the Earth is round. Or is it?
Wow, overcompensate much? You think she's got enough globes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 globes, and then look at the background of the whole thing. There's like globes and sun worship symbols everywhere. But so I guess the more globes she has on the set, the more the Earth itself is actually a globe. And don't you love how they've got the globe that's flattened out as if the only thing that changes on the flat Earth reality is that the globe Earth becomes a disk in infinite space. That's really the biggest misconception, I think, about flat Earth and why nobody really gets it, or so many people seem to not get it. Of course, most people aren't going to research too deeply into it because of how absurd it seems at first. I mean, we can all relate to that. But I think the real big problem with flat Earth is that the entire universe changes when you realize, or at least humor this hypothesis, right? So the sun is no longer 900,000 miles in diameter or whatever, 93 million miles away. Because flat Earth is mutually exclusive to the heliocentric values, and for a number of obvious reasons. Really, space as we know it, this infinitude of vacuous nebula and stars and galaxies, all that is fairy tales, fantasy, and it doesn't actually exist. And so in that respect, when they put all the globes up on stage and then show the globe being squished into a little flat Earth, it does imply that the heliocentric model basically stays the same, but then the Earth becomes a disk flying around and spinning around in space. Or at least that's sort of the subconscious implication, I would say. And people need to look into it deeper than that, because really the whole paradigm shift, I think, isn't so much about flat Earth, but about fake space and the centrality and uniqueness and wondrous world that we actually have. Not just like a little speck of dust flying around in the infinitude of nothingness, making us all, and really all of human history, insignificant.
Our cover story is reported by Brooke Silva Braga.
If you picture Earth as a ball spinning through space, the folks gathered at this park in Arcadia, California, are eager to argue, you're wrong.
So right off the bat, they've got this sort of spooky conspiratorial music going in the background, and I think it's great that somebody like CBS is covering the story, but it is a bit tongue-in-cheek, although what do you expect, right? When your average person sitting around watching TV sees something like this, they're going to either just, in one ear and out the other, or if they're even involved with it at all, they're going to be incredulous, naturally. But I still think, in spite of all that, some small percentage, or maybe a large percentage, of the many people who do see this piece might look into flat Earth and fake space and all the other stuff. But the way that they present it, what do we got to do to get an investigative reporter or a journalist in the mainstream who will actually do their diligence in terms of researching the topic? Or will they always perpetually sort of cover this topic tongue-in-cheek and basically present it as, look at how crazy these frickin' people are? Let's see what happens.
It's flatter than a pancake.
They call themselves flat earthers. They insist the Earth is, well, flat.
Curvature, I don't know. No one's ever seen it.
No offense at all to that guy there, but is that really the best thing that they got from either that conversation with him or all the conversations that they had in that gathering? And they probably picked that one blurb out of, I would assume, at least hours of footage, right? I don't know, curvature, nobody's seen it. I mean, certainly there were probably that same guy or plenty of the other flat earthers there were talking about the utter lack of curvature from many miles away, and how we never learned the curvature formula in school on the, in globe earth classes, but it is in fact flat earthers who are preaching the curvature calculation of the globe. But of course, the investigative journalist here for CBS won't mention that. They won't mention that there is actually no curvature and that it's flat earthers that are out there measuring for the curvature, which doesn't exist. No, they play a little soundbite of one little snippet of a conversation with this guy where he just basically says nobody's ever seen the curvature. And so from that, and I think they do even expound on that sort of point later, where they just basically say, well, it looks flat, so it must be flat, right? But yeah, it does look flat, but the thing is it goes way further than that. You know, all of the evidences for the globe, like the ships going over the edge or the shadow on the moon during a lunar eclipse, all of these so-called evidences for the globe Earth are just circumstantial, cherry-picked, confirmation bias, not proof whatsoever. But it just sort of, it gets under my skin when I see these mainstream reporters doing what I would suspect is editing around the conversation to project what they want to project through the piece, which is, of course, to subconsciously make fun of flat earthers by using little snippets of conversations that are not complete thoughts or complete sentences, really.
We're living, they say, on a disk, floating through space, with a tiny sun just overhead.
Like what flat earther says that? The Earth is a disk flying through space? Like, one of the biggest parts of flat Earth is that it's stationary. Like, how can he go and misrepresent the concept so grossly? No due diligence whatsoever, just making crap up. I mean, give me a break. Space doesn't even exist, buddy. So I don't think we can be, quote, floating through something that doesn't exist. Just saying. This is why people are flocking away from the mainstream media in droves, because they misrepresent facts, they have a bias in everything that they do, and an agenda in everything that they do. And, I make it a point to go against anything and everything that they say is good and beneficial and positive, because I know that they have this sort of agenda and bent, which is not looking out for the best interest of people and not giving a damn about the facts, just reporting whatever the old hell he wants. That's just ridiculous.
The edge is a wall of ice?
The perimeter of flat Earth is a wall of ice.
That's what's holding in the ocean.
That's what's containing everything.
And what's underneath?
Well, we haven't dug that deep.
Which, that's very true, although the way they cut away here in a second, and I'll replay that last little bit in a second, but the way that they cut away and the expression that he gives makes it seem like it's a silly answer. But quite frankly, the deepest that people have ever drilled in history is something like 8 miles, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not that deep. Regardless of the model, the Earth is very massive, and the deepest we can drill is about 8 miles. So we know that there's lava underneath the rock and different layers of sediment, or whatever's down there. But to be very honest with you, the whole theory that the Earth is a spinning ball constructed around a molten ball of lava, because you know how molten balls of lava are excellent structural foundations, right? Excellent. But the fact of the matter is what is actually below about 8 miles deep? Nobody knows. Sure, we could have theories about it, just like the Globers do, but that doesn't mean anything. That we could be absolutely wrong. We know there's lava down there at some point, a lot of places. There's oil and different layers of density rocks and such, but it's a very valid answer, I would say. And the way that it's presented makes it seem like it's a stupid answer. And so this is exactly how the media manipulates truth. And it just makes me sick, man. We're only 2 minutes into this thing, and I'm just ready to cut it off and say whatever, right?
What's containing everything.
And what's underneath?
Well, we haven't dug that deep.
Netta Hagler set up the meetup.
It's supposedly spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, but we can't feel it. I don't believe I'm spinning right now, no.
Probably most people who hear about it will laugh at it, think we're idiots. But we're not idiots. We're intelligent people from all walks of life and all ages.
Patricia Steer is one of what you might call the stars of today's flat Earth movement, which mostly orbits around YouTube.
Hey cat, catch the chat. Did you realize the Earth is flat?
Now that the plane's at cruising altitude, let's start the time lapse.
Flat Earthers have brought levels onto planes to prove they're flying level.
And we've been lied to on such a massive scale.
Okay, so instead of going into any evidence that we've all been familiarizing or trying to familiarize everyone with, instead of going into that, they go into this montage for Patricia Steer. Like, nothing against her, but then they go to D. Marble bringing a level onto the plane, and he kind of makes fun of it, but he doesn't exactly say what the purpose of it is. So this isn't anything against Patricia Steer or D. Marble at all. This is against this journalist. So the point of bringing a level onto the plane would be to show that the plane is flying level, and yet it is maintaining a level altitude. And I think really better than a level, because a level is going to correct itself along the curve of the hypothetical Earth anyway. But a gyroscope would probably do better, but the concept is very sound, that if a plane were indeed flying perfectly straight and level along above the globe, it should be gaining an altitude. And of course, airplane pilots do not use levels to indicate their artificial horizon or for their attitude indicator. They use gyroscopes historically, physical gyroscopes and gimbals, and nowadays they use the whole ring laser gyro, more advanced forms of the gyroscope. But you know, it's just that what the reporter's doing is giving half-truths and trying to discredit these people. I just wonder how deeply he looked into this. Is he just completely ignorant still? And if this is how bad of a job he does reporting just the basic facts about flat Earth, then how can we listen to anything else this freaking guy says? I mean, really. I'm talking about the reporter, you know. I guess you can't get too worked up over this, because what do you expect, really?
And zoomed in on the moon and found clouds drifting, supposedly, behind it.
So, for the one piece of evidence that this guy mentions, it's going to be a red herring, I'm sorry, but just ridiculous argument about clouds going behind the moon or the sun. This has to do with different layers of density clouds in the sky, and the relatively high gain light coming from the sun or the moon is going to penetrate certain layers of these clouds easily, and it will not penetrate other layers of those clouds, giving the illusion that the sun or the moon is going, you know, behind and in front of, in between clouds. But nowhere in the flat Earth model is the sun or the moon inside of the troposphere, which is where the clouds would be. So, you know, anybody who's making that claim, especially somebody that's supposed to be a professional journalist, just lost all credibility in my book. And I'm not trying to diss anyone that was there at that rally. I really am not. I'm trying to point out that we just cannot trust the mainstream media to ever tell us the truth if it's something that upsets the apple cart even a little bit, especially not something as major as flat Earth. So, you know, the only way that I would do any kind of an interview with a CBS or these mainstream channel reporters would be if I had some sort of editorial control in the final product, because it is their job and mission to discredit these sorts of topics. Anything that's true and has a chance to upset the apple cart, as it were, is going to be discredited by these frickin' people.
Patricia Steer agreed to play a game of 20 questions, Cosmic Edition. Photos of the Earth from space.
Completely and utterly false.
Is the sun 93 million miles away?
No, the sun is not as far away as we've been told, nor is the moon. They're probably about the same size.
How about those photos of the astronauts who look like they're floating around on the space station?
Completely fake. Harnesses, wires.
Did we really go to the moon?
No, we didn't go to the moon, and we don't have a rover on Mars, and we didn't do a flyby of Pluto, and we've never been to space. Period. End of.
Well said. Gotta say, well said. And for the 10 seconds that he gave her, I think she made as valid of points as anyone could to those questions. Valid of answers to those questions as anyone could have given. So, bravo, Patty.
In short, flat earthers don't believe much of anything unless they see it for themselves.
Well, it's like this, man. When you know that the Earth doesn't have curvature, and you know that the Earth is not in motion, and you know that infinite space doesn't exist, then entities like NASA absolutely could not be orbiting around in space that doesn't exist. So it just goes without saying that the astronauts and the space agencies are necessarily lying, and we can send up weather balloons to plenty high enough to determine whether or not this curvature exists. And indeed, the horizon remains eye level regardless of altitude, and the curvature that we were tricked into believing was there with fisheye lenses does not exist. Therefore, the sun and the heliocentric model couldn't be as claimed by globe earthers, and infinite space doesn't exist as a direct result of those facts.
They say NASA is just a part of a massive conspiracy.
It's a giant game of chess. We, all of us in humanity, are the pawns. Part of the whole flat earth thing is keeping us locked down, not knowledgeable about who we are, who we really are as people, and what we're capable of.
You think something new is happening?
I do think something new is happening. People have really become obsessed with the idea that if it's not part of their direct experience, it can't be true.
Don't you just love that? 3 minutes in to a 7-minute little story of flat Earth, they give an entire minute to the first guy who was going to tell you that flat earthers are basically stupid. So let's hear what he has to say. Let's hear him prove the Earth's curvature.
Tom Nichols takes a dim view of flat Earth. A national security expert, he teaches at the Harvard Extension School.
Oh, well, then he must know everything, and he must not have been completely tricked about his ass living on a spinning ball since he was a toddler, because he's Mr. High and Mighty.
You remain champion.
He also won Jeopardy! 5 times.
Well, he knows his trivia, therefore the Earth is a spinning ball.
People have lost faith in experts. We've developed a kind of reverse snobbery that says if you have a great deal of education, if you're at a well-known institution, by definition you must be a liar.
That is absolutely not the case at all. The fact of the matter is if you have some high degree in anything theoretical, then I would say that you're not necessarily a liar, you've just been massively deceived, more so than the average Joe. The astronauts are necessarily liars, but this is just nonsense.
Nichols poured his expertise into a book about the death of expertise.
How about just look at a little bit of flat Earth evidence and discuss the flat Earth evidence if you're going to do a piece on flat Earth. Oh, that's right, I forgot. This is a hit piece on flat Earth, of course.
Oftentimes younger people will say, well, the internet is just a big library. That's wrong. The internet is a big dumpster. There's no guarantee that anything you find on it is true.
Well, I agree. There is definitely fake news on the internet, but there's also fake news right here in the exact thing that you're in. This is fake news. Misrepresenting facts, inventing red herring facts, cherry picking the worst arguments for flat Earth, and completely ignoring the fact that the Earth has no curvature and is not in motion.
It's more democratic, isn't that good?
No, when it comes to knowledge, more democratic is not good. Absolutely not. We don't decide how fast things accelerate in a vacuum by voting on it.
No, you just force everyone what to think, starting when they're too young to argue with you, and anyone who disagrees with these absurd theories about living stuck to the side of a spinning sphere is ostracized and is a heretic to your religion of scientism.
So, in this show it to me world, we traveled to the Southern California desert to meet for ourselves the one man who is boldly going where no flat earther has gone before.
And really, how does this guy keep showing up in the news? Like, aren't there more flat earthers out there than Mad Mike Hughes? A steam rocket going up a couple thousand foot.
I am their best hope. I am the best hope to prove the flat Earth.
That is absolutely ridiculous. The flat Earth has already been proven in spades. The globe Earth theory has been debunked many, many different ways. Couldn't possibly be true. And I'm sorry, but I don't know any flat earthers who think that there is some sort of lacking evidence for flat Earth. Or I don't know any flat earthers who believe that flat Earth somehow has yet to be proven. I mean, really, how could you be a flat earther unless you have seen the evidence that the Earth is flat and stationary? I mean, this is just ridiculous. And I'm sorry, but anybody who's banking on Mad Mike Hughes to prove flat Earth, this is a fiasco, if you want my opinion. I want nothing to do with it. This Mad Mike Hughes nonsense.
Meet Michael Hughes, Mad Mike to his fans, limo driver, self-styled daredevil, and most recently, do-it-yourself flat Earth explorer.
The flat Earth thing is like everything else to me. I just want people to question everything. Question what your congressman is doing, your city council. Question what really happened during the Civil War, what happened during 9/11.
And okay, I agree with him there, and yes, he seems like a very nice guy there, but just remember how he got into flat Earth. Allegedly, this is the story as I understand it, he was an existing flat earther driving down the highway, and he was already planning to do his steam rocket jump. Then one day, as he was driving down the highway, he saw a billboard for Research Flat Earth, and that's what gave him the brilliant idea to basically bilk flat earthers for lots of money to put a simple sticker decal, a large decal on the outside of his steam rocket that went up about 1,800 foot. So I'm sorry, but what flat earther needs to get the idea from a billboard? Because he claimed he had been a flat earther. He was doing the rocket jump. Then he saw the billboard that basically got him to reach out to flat earthers to sponsor his rocket jump by paying thousands of dollars to put a sticker on the outside of the thing. I'm just not buying the story. Any true blue flat earther would put a flat earth sticker all over that thing for free. And yes, I understand it costs money to do stuff like that, but I'm just not buying the story that a flat earther needed to see a flat earth billboard in order to get the idea to reach out to flat earthers to raise money for this rocket jump that went up all of 1,800 foot.
And that rocket, sitting outside his house, Mad Mike built it himself. How does one go about finding out how to build a rocket?
More trial and error. That's a bunch of it, you know. And after you
don't get a lot of second chances, though.
No, you don't.
The rocket business.
Yeah, especially when you're about 1,800 feet up.
You know, I hate to say it, but that reporter doesn't have to do a whole lot to make Mike Hughes look stupid. Just saying.
Let's go. You know, these things are not easy to do.
This past March, Mad Mike actually climbed into his steam-powered rocket and set off to see what he could see. And to the surprise of almost everyone, Mike not only took flight, but landed, more or less intact.
You know, that event that he did last year, which according to Google is the most important and most popular flat earth thing that's ever happened, which I really don't get that. He went up all of 1,800 foot and didn't prove anything. It was a publicity stunt.
All right, Mike. Okay, Mike. We're gonna support you.
This doesn't hurt. Nothing hurts. Just your back. Cool.
True, 1,800 feet is not nearly high enough to properly survey the planet, but Mad Mike now has a plan to go 62 miles up to the edge of space, where he'll be able to see, or not see, the curve of Earth. This model, hanging in his house, shows how he hopes to strap himself to a contraption involving balloons and rockets and blast off.
This reporter is laughing uncontrollably, basically, as he narrates this thing, and rightly so, I would say. Let's just listen to the plan that Mike has to go up to 62 miles.
First 20 miles to be with the balloon, and after that, my rocket will fire, pull me through the balloon, And then actually, once the rocket quits firing, I will actually fly like Superman for like another 30 seconds.
Like Superman, yeah, just had to get that in there. Let's just get this straight. When you get up 20 miles, the atmosphere, the air is so thin that there really is no real air resistance to speak of. When you see things like the Red Bull jump, and assuming that was real, which I think it was, when they jump from those super high altitudes, there's no air resistance. There's basically no air pressure. That's why, they have to wear spacesuits to do these high altitude jumps. But if you actually believe that you're going to launch a steam rocket from a platform hanging from a balloon or whatever that's 20 miles up, I'm sorry, but I just don't see how that could possibly work. There's no air pressure for the escaping gases from that steam rocket to escape from. And really, I don't think it matters what kind of rocket it is. If you don't have that air pressure, the ambient air pressure that we enjoy here in the lower levels of the atmosphere, there's going to be nothing for rocket propulsion to push off of. I'll tell you, I would be very surprised if you light off that steam rocket from 20 miles up. I'd be surprised if it did anything but fall straight back down immediately.
With no power, just up into the atmosphere.
And if he somehow pulls that off, Mad Mike says he'll disprove centuries of science once and for all. Or not.
I expect to see a flat disk up there.
Well, I don't expect you'll see a flat disk up there, because even let's say you do get up to 62 miles, you're not going to be high enough to see from one end of the plane to the other. And that's just talking about, say Antarctica. That's not even talking about what's beyond there, potentially. What you should expect to see from that altitude is, assuming that the Earth is a plane, and as large as we know that it is, you're going to see the horizon at your eye level in all directions, just like you always see from all the other altitudes. But I just really, let's just put it this way, I'll be very surprised if that steam rocket gets up any higher than 20 miles. I mean, that's why NASA launches their rockets into the sea, is because rocket propulsion don't work in a vacuum or a very low pressure environment.
I don't have an agenda. If it's around Earth or a ball, I'm going to come down and say, hey, guys, I'm bad. It's a ball, okay?
I don't care what you say, Mad Mike Hughes. The Earth is not a ball, could not be a ball, and there's no way in hell that it's a ball. See, that's what makes me suspect about you even being a legit flat earther, is like you take this stance as if we need evidence somehow for flat Earth, as if you're not really convinced, and you're basically saying that it might be a ball and maybe you're wrong. And, that may seem humble, but it really makes you look ignorant, in my opinion, because the whole thing about being a flat earther is that 100% certainly that the Earth isn't a spinning ball, so it must be flat. It's not in motion, and it's not spinning around. It doesn't have curvature. So I just don't understand what is your agenda?
And with that, we put the ball back in Professor Nichols' court.
Oh yeah, we got to give the final 2 cents in the final 30 seconds to the completely ignorant, cynical globehead who's never even going to consider the truth as a valid hypothesis, as if we need any more of these degree-toting parrots to try to reconvince us that the Earth is a spinning ball. That's only working on the general sheeple. Hate to say it, but yep, gotta let him get his last word in. After doing a 7-minute video about flat Earth, you give basically 2 sentences to people making proofs or discussing the flat Earth, over a minute and a half to this clown, and then Mike Hughes, who's done nothing but make a fool of himself, in my opinion. Typical lamestream media garbage.
The world looks flat. I look out my window, I don't see a curve.
Right, the world looks flat, and who are you to tell me that my perception is no better than anyone else's?
But see, that is just a huge lie, because the evidence is not that the world looks flat, which indeed it does, agreed, but the true fact of the matter is that measurably, discernibly, hundreds of miles away, the Earth is in fact flat and is not in motion. So in spite of everything else, even if the heliocentric model worked on every other observation in space, which it does not, I can assure you there's major problems with the heliocentric theory. Just give you one off the top of my head. The shadow of the moon is sometimes a few miles in diameter, which is physically impossible, according to the globe Earth theory, where the moon is some 2,000 mile diameter object 238,000 miles away. So they invent the penumbra and umbra theories, where the light from the sun is basically coming in at a heavy angle in order to cast this pinpointer stylus pen pointer of a shadow from the moon during eclipses. But that's not how light and shadow operate. That's ridiculous. And of course, Eratosthenes' value absolutely does not work unless the sunlight is coming in at nearly perfectly parallel angles, not at wildly divergent angles as is necessary to create this pinpointer shadow of the moon, which is not demonstrable in reality, this behavior of light and shadow, where the shadow tapers off into a point with distance. Simply ridiculous. And there's just so much wrong with the ball Earth theory, but none of the facts in this piece were discussed about the true proofs for flat Earth, the blatant obvious proofs, and how everyone has been tricked into believing that the Earth is a ball since they were just little children, and the evidence is all around us. It's literally ubiquitous. It's everywhere. There is no evidence for motion or curvature for the Earth, and yet that is the belief, although this piece did nothing but try to discredit the facts.
And I think that's a really dangerous thing because, the Earth is round, and you'll learn that the hard way if you try and fly an airplane.
I don't remember hearing you being introduced as a pilot, and there's tons of pilots who are flat earthers. Really, I think it's much easier to show a pilot this truth because they have indeed flown over a flat and stationary plane for thousands of hours, some of them. So for you, a non-pilot, to say, well, you might think the Earth's flat until you try to fly a plane. Well, do you know anything about flying a plane? Do you know about the attitude indicator, the horizontal gyroscope, that must not be adjusted during flight? Because the horizon never needs to be adjusted. The horizon is always at the same position everywhere in the world. Doesn't change. And because gyroscopes hold their rigidity in space, if the Earth were a ball, you would constantly need to adjust your artificial horizon. You would need to dip your nose down in order to adhere to the ball. And if you were to fly straight and level according to a gyroscopic indicator, you would necessarily be raising in altitude just by flying straight and level if the Earth was a ball. And yet, that's not what happens. So a non-pilot, completely closed-minded cynic who's never considered the truth as a viable hypothesis is going to try to put the truth back into the bottle. Right. All right, everybody. I'm, not trying to diss anybody in this video other than this reporter who, although I think it's great that he's getting flat Earth out there, I don't trust him, wouldn't touch any of his other work, wouldn't recommend him to anyone because he did just an awful job researching flat Earth, an awful job explaining it. He cast every single person who was a proponent for the flat Earth in this video in such a light to where he was basically ridiculing them without saying as much, laughing under his breath every time he was trying to explain the different flat Earth elements, and just covered red herring arguments, didn't cover any of the actual proof, and gave really, I would say, over half of the interview time to the globehead guy. And of course, Mad Mike Hughes, the flat earther who isn't sure if the Earth is flat. Just absolutely cynical globehead guy who will never actually humor the hypothesis of flat Earth, which makes him the opposite of a scientist. So with that, thanks so much for watching, everybody. As always, spread the word, spread the world, and peace out, everybody.
Make the earth shake.